Recently, I ranked all of the NPC exploration teams in Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky, using everything from in-game lore to personal bits of in-depth examinations of each Pokemon's stats and movesets as part of my decision during the ranking. While I was initially satisfied with the outcome, a lingering concern persisted. Had I been fair to every team? Some teams I ranked rather low because I thought they couldn't competently handle most, if not all, of the dungeons of the game. However, I wasn't sure. After years spent online, I've learned that unconventional strategies can, with enough patience, lead to success in mainline Pokemon games, but could the same be said for Mystery Dungeon? To find out, I designed a challenge testing whether or not the laziest NPCs in Mystery Dungeon could, in fact, beat the entire story. Say hello to the Team Slacker Challenge. Team Slacker is an NPC exploration team of Slowpoke and Slakoth. I initially ranked them C tier in my original tier list, given their limited movesets, Slowpoke's low to mid stats, and Slakoth's Truant ability, which makes them only able to move half the turns. If there was ever any team to prove a challenge like this, it would be these two. Team Slacker would need to tackle every story dungeon and defeat Primal Dialga using only these two Pokemon, no recruiting allowed. Between the two partners, I chose to play as Slowpoke, as despite having lower stats than Slakoth, the fact that Slowpoke starts with Curse allows me to make up the stat differential, and I didn't want to play the entire game with Truant. I already knew this challenge would revolve around minimizing Truant's impact, and I'd rather impact the NPC partner than myself. Clearly this was a good decision, as Tackle was more than enough to bulldoze through Beach Cave and, after a quick curse, one-shot both Zubat and Coughing at the end of the cave. Not long after destroying these nerds, Slakoth and I lazily made our way over to Wigglytuff's guild, mainly because they have comfy beds and these two are very sleepy. But apparently the guild isn't a hotel, and the cost for a room signing up for an exploration team. Wild. Anywho, this seems like an appropriate name. Oddly enough, I had some trouble in Drench Bluff, the very next dungeon, with Slowpoke running out of PP for Tackle by floor 5 and getting KO'd by a Chingling on floor 6 because of a very silly mistake, giving Slakoth an Oranberry when he was still at full health and I only had 1 HP. Not exactly my sharpest moment. Thankfully, on the second attempt, I didn't make any goofy mistakes and made it through with no issues, only to get rapidly thrown into the plot and being forced by Slakoth to go rescue Azurill from Drowsy. By conserving my Tackle PP, we were able to blow through Mount Bristle, getting both Slakoth and Slowpoke to level 10 before the boss fight. And just to live up to the Team Slacker name, I let Drowsy hit me with Hypnosis and Disable, leaving me asleep and paralyzed on the floor while Slakoth hit him with 3 scratches. Pretty much all I contributed to the match was feeding Slakoth a Blast Seed during one of my turns, paralyzed. Maximum Slacker vibes. Thankfully, that was all we needed to take out the early boss, because these first dungeons were designed to be absurdly easy. Shortly after that, there were a few mandatory days of taking on regular missions, one of which included hunting down an outlaw Doduo that decided to run away into the funniest possible situation. I mean, just look at this total genius, getting trapped in the most obvious dead end ever. I mean, like, come on. I wasted those sleep seeds. I completely wasted those sleep seeds. During these missions, I leveled up and learned Water Gun, which was a great second offensive move since I've been rolling with exclusively Tackle until now. Additionally, one of the items we got from one of these missions was a TM for rest, which forces the user to take a nap and wake up fully healed. Obvious Team Slacker vibes, and since Yon's a bit redundant to have on both teammates, I'll replace it with rest. Eventually, Team Slacker is given an exciting assignment to explore Waterfall Cave, though the more important part is the discovery that Team Slacker was cloned! Man, it feels weird playing as NPCs and seeing said NPCs still be in the game. I was a little worried about Waterfall Cave due to the fact that Water Gun wouldn't be nearly as effective here as it had been in previous dungeons, but thankfully the only real challenge we faced was the hunger acquired from accidentally getting our toes wet. At the end, the laziest team in the world is rewarded with a lovely, relaxing time at the hot spring. The following day, however, the whole guild is surprised to find the 2 stinky nerds we one-shot earlier were back in town, and the Team Slacker clones were out and about in Treasure Town once more. Also, one of the mods apparently broke rendering for coughing in certain cutscenes, and I have absolutely no clue how or why. He just occasionally be replaced with a missing texture square, which I've never seen across any of the randomizers or ROM hacks I've played in this game. Absolutely wild. Shortly after, Team Stinky raids the guild's food supply, and if there's one thing that can motivate Team Slacker off our lazy butts, it's food. So we quickly head to Applewoods to snag some perfect apples. Slowpoke and Slakoth both level up, with Slakoth even learning a new move, Slack Off, which, I mean, just looking at the name, that's gotta be a mandatory move for this team. Thankfully, that's an absurdly good move to learn, as it instantly heals half a user's max HP. Between Slowpoke's Rest and Slakoth's Slack Off, try saying that 7 times fast, both party members have instant healing moves that are very on brand, and it started looking like this challenge might be easier than I expected. Anywho, story cutscene, Team Slacker confronts Team Stinky, the broken texture glitch switches to chat out for some reason, and Outlaw Burmy absolutely demolishes Team Slacker, forcing us to use 3 Reviver Seeds, and eating both an Oran Berry and another Reviver Seed directly out of her bag for no reason. He took a Reviver Seed! Before knocking this out completely. This Burmy is the final boss of this challenge, I swear. What an asshole. Thankfully, here comes Expedition announcements, and it's off to continue the plot by adventuring to Fogbound Lake. We get paired up with Bidoof on the way, who seems to match the Team Slacker vibes pretty well as a fellow Mon of Lazy. Nothing too eventful happens beyond Slowpoke learning Confusion and getting down to 3 HP in Upper Steam Cave, only for me to misclick feed Slakoth and Oran Berry on accident. But thankfully, we'd acquired some Reviver Seeds again to recover from yet another misclick, leading us to our first real boss fight of the game, Groudon. I thought that we wouldn't have much of a problem with Groudon, given that Slowpoke knows Water Gun and we collectively have enough status moves to keep Groudon from hurting us, but my heart sank when I saw that Water Gun only did about 11 damage to this beast. While Slakoth might be slow and strong, Slowpoke is abysmally weak, meaning this one fight took a whole 4.5 minutes of just slowly chipping away at Groudon's health. I was right about Groudon barely ever being able to hit us, but if this was any indication of the future, it was that boss fights would take a lot longer than I was expecting. And while Groudon isn't much of a threat, there were other bosses that absolutely could be. Suddenly, we're back in Treasure Town with a golden opportunity. A lot of Mystery Dungeon players often forget about Croagunk's swap shop, which with all the boxes we acquired on the way to Fogbound Lake should provide Team Slacker with exactly what they need to overcome their limitations. There are 2 extremely useful items we can get here. The Slowpoke Hat, which can reduce the speed of opponents who attack Slowpoke, and the Slack Scarf, which means that anyone who attacks Slakoth could be spontaneously forced to sleep. While I think the latter items are much more valuable than the former, they both provide an insane buff for this team, essentially making Team Slacker contagious and much harder to hit. It looks like we got them just in time though, as Team Slacker is immediately roped into climbing ant plains to get Azrael's special item, a water float, which I was frankly terrified of. Team Slacker had specialized in destroying single targets with their effect moves, Yawning Confusion, but at the end of ant plains waited a family of Electrike, eager to attack us. I had no clue how Team Slacker would fare against them, as their multi-target success had yet to be tested. And I was quite right to be afraid. While it was easy to take down Manectric and each Electrike individually, being outnumbered did unfortunately force both Slowpoke and Slakoth to use Reviver Seed, but thankfully the Hat and Scarf helped a lot with putting attackers to sleep and slowing them down before they could wipe us out completely. After most of the Electrike family was knocked out, we were left with one Electrike who was, a bit confused. Somehow we broke his pathfinding, which was really funny just kind of watching him pace back and forth behind that rock. I mean, look at this goofy dog. There are 0 thoughts on that head. He should absolutely be the 3rd member of Team Slacker. Immediately after that, the plot forces Team Slacker to head to the Northern Desert, which sounds like a pretty simple dungeon. Our first run went pretty well, with Slakoth even learning Feint Attack and Slowpoke learning Disable part of the way through. But unfortunately, we did lose our last Reviver Seed due to Carnivine, almost wiped to a Sandshrew using Rollout immediately afterward, and then on the last 4, Slakoth did get fully knocked out by Carnivine's Vine Whip. But our second attempt got us all the way through with no issues. However, the Quicksand Cave, the immediate follow-up dungeon, was where issues would begin. No, wait, you resist Psychic. Okay, it didn't matter anyway, it missed. Yeah, I die. Hit you with a headbutt. God damn it! Don't kill! How are you? Slack off, you have slack off. How did I die? I was at full health. Don't kill me, don't kill me, don't kill me. Why did that do 60? And it might not help anyway, because you could die in one hit to rapid spin, you motherfucker! It is fucking horrendous. I die here because I miss. You wouldn't think a dungeon full of ground-type Pokemon would pose a challenge for Slowpoke, but you would be sorely mistaken. Even with the type advantage, Slowpoke is a lot weaker than most of the enemy Pokemon. The constant sandstorms made it nearly impossible to naturally heal and made most of our moves miss. Some Pokemon like Scorypea could easily hit us for 50 to 60 damage, and all the moves we've held onto so far had rather low PP amounts, so we would often run out of PP only halfway through the dungeon. Add to it the fact that after the first time fainting, Team Slacker lost both their Slowpoke Hat and Slack Scarf, and this rapidly became one of the hardest PMD dungeons I've ever faced. Oh, and don't forget about monster houses, since we're far enough into the game for them to start generating. I was stuck grinding out this dungeon for multiple hours across multiple streams, basically slamming my head into the wall trying to develop a strategy that worked. I had to avoid line of sight from Scorypea since they knew Poison Sting, all while conserving as much offensive PP as possible, opting to hit dangerous foes with Disable and using my basic A attack to chip away at their health, and hide behind Slakoth after they recover from paralysis, since Slakoth is absolutely just the tank of the team. All of that, only to still continue unfortunately die only halfway through Quicksand Pit just because RNG didn't work out. Looking back, I think it would have been lazier to just recruit him on to get through Quicksand Pit, but I wanted to keep this run true to the Team Slacker experience, so instead I worked hard to keep pushing as a duo through the 10-floor hell that was this dungeon. Eventually though, after far more grinding time than I'd care to admit, we finally made it through. Yes! Finally! I was extremely worried about the Mesprit fight, because I knew that if we failed, we'd have to go back through Quicksand Pit once more. But thankfully, between Disable and Yawn, we were able to take them out without getting hit once, which was the biggest relief of my life. That said, all of those losses set Team Slacker back quite a bit, leaving us without the Slowpoke hat and the Slack Scarf. Neither of them could be recovered from the swap shop quite yet either. But is that going to stop the Zero Motivation Exploration Team? I mean, yeah, it probably would, but the plot demands we take on Crystal Cave next. Thankfully, Crystal Cave was a lot easier than Quicksand Cave, with far easier opposing Pokemon. The only notable thing that occurred here at all is that the somewhat funny moment of Slowpoke standing next to a Slow Trap. So of course, in the very next dungeon, Crystal Crossing, Slakoth fainted almost immediately to 2 Floatzels, which is especially embarrassing if you remember that Slakoth knows Slack Off. He literally could have just healed himself through it and chose not to. Gotta love NPCs making horrible decisions. Our second shot at Crystal Crossing was a bit tricky, in large part due to the fact that Team Slacker's usually hard-hitting moves were a bit weaker against Pokemon like Floatzel and Absol, but playing strategically and relying more on disabling enemies allowed the team to schmooth through the crossing, making it to Crystal Lake just in time for a Grovyle fight. Now, I had planned on facing Grovyle with the same strategy I faced previous bosses with. Disable them, like Slakoth put them to sleep, and beat the crap out of them while they can't move. Instead, I misinput a rest and fainted in one hit of a Leaf Blade. Thank goodness this fight was designed to progress the plot whether we won or lost, but I was not emotionally prepared for yet another misclick. As a result of Team Slacker's failure, dusknoir offers to pick up the slack where they left off and take down Grovyle, leaving us with a few days of regular missions in the meantime. On one of these mandatory mission days, Slowpoke did learn a new move, replacing Headbutt with Water Pulse, which even in the moment I knew was a risky decision, leaving Slowpoke with only Water-type offensive moves. I tried to avoid Mono-type offenses, but I was fairly certain it was the right move going into future dungeons. Which, speaking of... After being kidnapped to the future, Team Slacker gets tied up and executed alongside Grovyle, or at least they would have if the ropes actually went around their bodies. Instead, they were able to escape and explore the paralyzed dungeons of the future. The first of which, Chasm Cave, caused no real issues, in large part due to Slakoth actually remembering to heal when his HP was low. The next dungeon, Dark Hill, was a bit scarier as a single Shadow Ball from Ghastly deals 74 damage to Slowpoke, which was enough to catch me by surprise and at my first attempt at the dungeon. During the second attempt, we did pick up a TM for Aerial Ace, which somehow Slakoth can learn, so we replaced Hidden Power with it. There were a few more scary moments, which makes sense given the 15-floor length of the dungeon, but Team Slacker made it through with relative ease on their second attempt. The third future dungeon, Sealed Ruin, also posed no issues and gave Slowpoke a TM for Brine, another water-type move that can deal a lot more damage when enemies are under half HP than either Water Gun or Water Pulse, at the cost of significantly less PP. Still, having less PP overall is a risk I was willing to take, replacing Water Gun with Brine going forward. A surprise monster house popped up during the first floor of Deep Sealed Ruin, but a Spurn Orb and one Reviver Seed was enough to prevent us from losing the run. Or at least keep the run going to floor 4 when a Tangrowth's Absorb knocked out Slowpoke pretty quickly. Whoops! Feels weird having survived the monster house but not the random Tangrowth, you know? On attempt 2, we plowed through the dungeon with no surprises and made it to the next boss fight against Spiritomb. You should know by now what my strategy is against bosses: disable, yawn, and beat the crap out of them. Even got to add Confused to that list with a lucky Water Pulse, and after landing a crit Brine that dealt 185 damage, Spiritomb was no more. Going forward into Dusk Forest, Grovyle actually joins Team Slacker as a temporary ally, which did nothing to prevent Slowpoke from getting one shot by Bullet Seed on floor 4. Well, okay, technically it was a 2-shot since it was a multi-hit move and it hit twice, but Slowpoke went from 90 to 0 HP without getting to move. I think that counts as getting one shot. Officially adding Jumpluff to my danger Pokemon list. Frankly, Grovyle might actually do some more harm than good on this team, as during attempt 2 he stepped on a summon switch, summoning 3 Mothams who rapidly destroyed Slowpoke with 119 damage bug bite. Holy cow. I probably could have avoided it if I was paying more attention, but it was only floor 2. In my defense, I was a bit distracted. The new Turtle Boy game was coming out that week, and I was excited for the sequel of my favorite game of all time. Subtle plug. Eventually, we made it through and met up with Celebi in a cutscene I'd pretty much entirely skipped, leading us to Deep Dusk Forest. I got a little close to death thanks to an Aggron on floor 6, but thankfully, with my team's healing moves, chip damage really isn't much of a threat anymore. I'm solely worried about the single-shot high damage moves, and nobody in this dungeon had any, so we schmoofed through it pretty easily. I was too lazy to name my character. The Slowpoke I know isn't a Pokemon. The Slowpoke that I know is a human. Sometimes I forget just how funny it is to accidentally break the story with a silly name. Anywho, a few more story cutscenes and Team Slacker's headed back to the past. Gotcha. And we're on to Tree Shroud Forest. I was worried at first that this might be a repeat of Quicksand Cave, a long dungeon where I objectively have a type advantage over most Pokemon since there are a surprising amount of fire types in Tree Shroud Forest, but thankfully this was surprisingly easy. Brine absolutely carried me. Even if my opponents weren't under half health, it still consistently dealt buckets of damage. This part of the game thankfully has a lot of emotion and plot, which is great if we're playing vanilla, but Team Slacker's too lazy to watch these cutscenes. I'm just eager to save the world so I can go take a nap. After a quick restock, we were thankfully able to reacquire the Slowpoke hat at Croagunk's shop, which was a huge relief provided we can keep it while we head to Brine Cave. There are a lot of water-type Pokemon in this dungeon, including Gastrodon with Storm Drain, and again, the boss at the end is a group instead of a solo boss, so once again I was quite worried. Especially after a random seal on floor 2 hit Slakoth with 143 damage Brine, forcing us to use our last Reviver Seed. Good lord, what a powerful shot. On floor 3 I thought I was safe to explore away from the team, but somehow Chatot got KO'd off screen. So clearly Brine Cave isn't going to be one of those easy dungeons for us. Attempt 2 at Brine Cave had a pretty lucky series of spawns directly next to the stairs, right before Slowpoke learned Zen Headbutt, which I had set to replace Brine instead of replacing Water Pulse. In retrospect, possibly a mistake, but I value having a distance move over a double damage at half health move. Tell me whether you think you would have made the same choice though. Regardless, Zen Headbutt was able to get me through to the midpoint of Brine Cave, where Team Stinky pops in and allows us to get through the second half without Chatot, which, yeah, I'm thankful for. That baby bird's why we lost that first attempt. And without him, we schmooved through Lower Brine Cave with ease to face the terrifying boss of Kabutops and the Omastar brothers. Quickly, we hit one of the Omastars with a Hunger Seed, it disabled the others, and put Kabutops to sleep. While we did take a few hits before this, once the status conditions were applied, it was pretty much over. The only challenge being having to rotate who we were applying statuses to. We wiped them out with only one Oran Berry used, and even that was more just for security than needed. And now, time to hop onto a Flying Lapras's back and head to the Hidden Land, where our final challenges await. Bosses alone I knew would be terrifying, as dusknoir is a massive group fight and Primal Dialga would be able to deal absurd amounts of damage. But with the power of Lazy within us, Team Slacker pressed on. Hidden Land started off with some really fortunate stair spawns, but surprised us with a monster house on floor 5. Thankfully, we did come prepared with a Spurn Orb, and that mostly resolved that issue. There were a few moments I dropped to low health, but having rest and 2 allies allowed for recovery when it was necessary. However, by floor 8, I had already exhausted all PP for my offensive moves, relying solely on my allies that deal damage. Unfortunately, this meant leaving Slakoth wide open against the Garchomp, whose Dragon Claw knocked him out pretty quickly. It's clear that prioritizing maintaining PP is going to be an important strategy in these final dungeons. Attempt 2 was a fun surprise when an off-screen Bastiodon crit shot Slakoth with the 72 damage Ancient Power, but apparently throughout the challenge I'd acquired the Bodyguard IQ, allowing me to tank the next attack and save Slakoth from fainting. I figured IQ wasn't too important since neither Slowpoke nor Slakoth were in very good IQ groups, but Bodyguard did manage to come in clutch here, which I'm thankful for. Shame I got hit with a 93 damage Woodhammer on the next floor, instantly wiping the run and losing us the Slowpoke hat. Anywho, I ended the stream after that, and whoops, apparently I forgot to save, and there's no way for you to prove that this was just some poorly veiled excuse for me to keep my Slowpoke hat, okay? Regardless, once again I got KO'd on floor 8, and this time by a crit slash by Perugly, doing 71 damage and, of course, taking away that Slowpoke hat once more. On attempt 4, I did manage to randomly find a Reviver Seed, which was nice, but I did stumble into Monster House on floor 10. A Spurn Orb helped me get out of it, only to quickly lose my Reviver Seed to Atropius and her random 78 damage Magical Leaf. Regardless, thanks to Reviver Seed, we pushed forward, making it past floor 15 to the halfway save point. The second half of the dungeon, Hidden Highland, was mostly the same as Hidden Land, with similar Pokemon traps and overall vibes, though with only 8 floors. Outside of one moment where Slakoth was really slacking off, and just refusing to use moves, I really didn't have any issues with the dungeon itself, leading us to the old ruins and the boss fight I was most worried about. Dusknoir and his team of Sableye. Of everyone on screen right now, Team Slacker actually has the lowest level, with both of us at only level 36, while the Sableye were at level 38 and Dusknoir himself sitting at level 45. It was pretty clear that our usual status effect focus strategy wouldn't work against hitting this many Pokemon. I started the battle hitting Dusknoir with an Xi Seed, making him incapable of telling who was friend versus who was foe, hopefully allowing him to take out his own Sableye for us. Grovyle was able to come in clutch on his side with even his weakest attack, Absorb, one-shotting Sableye with 95 damage, but within the first turn, one Sableye brought Slakoth down to 13 HP with a feint attack, so I spent turn 2 giving him an Oran Berry and hoping Dusknoir, Grovyle, and Slakoth could take out a few more. Grovyle absolutely held up his end of the bargain, absorbing another Sableye, but Dusknoir just kind of walked away. Which, hey, better than attacking us, I suppose. The next 2 turns were more of the same, healing Slakoth and letting Grovyle take out the Sableye, and slowly but surely we whittled down all the remaining Sableye, right before Dusknoir recovered from that Xi Seed. Now we're down to a single target, so usual strats work great. A Disable, a Yawn, and lots of high damage moves finally took him down. I genuinely had no clue whether Team Slacker would be able to get this far at all. And while normally I'm emotionally invested in the story cutscenes, the only important part for this challenge is that Grovyle was leaving us. Team Slacker would be on our own for the two halves of Temporal Tower and the final boss fight at the end of it. After a bit of inventory rearrangement to make sure we're as prepared as possible, it's off to the races for Team Slacker as we take on the hardest challenge yet. The enemies in Temporal Tower have a lot of health, so while Water Pulse does have the type advantage for most of them, it's still a huge struggle to knock out even a single Pokemon, so trying to conserve PP without dying was absolutely critical. Even on the first floor, and quite a few times afterwards, Slakoth dropped down to a critical HP, but we were able to keep pushing forward until a surprise summon trap on floor 8 brought us face to face with a Porygon who loves to spam discharge, two of which were enough to take out Slakoth. Alright. Here we go. Attempt 2 was close on floor 3 when a Porygon and a Lunatone ganged up on us, and then the same thing on floor 6, and then ended on floor 7 by Signal Beam and Discharge in a hallway. Attempt 3, floor 3, Signal Beam by Porygon. Attempt 4, floor 4, Gyro Ball, which isn't even very effective, by Bronzor for 75 damage. Attempt 5 had a lot of close calls, even running out of PP by floor 9, but somehow we pushed through floor 13, making it to the halfway point of Temporal Tower. A complete PP and HP refresh, and no turning back from here. Plus, since Porygon was my biggest threat in the first half, I knew that the second half, Temporal Spire, would be even harder, as both Porygon 2 and Porygon Z can spawn, both of which still have Signal Beam and Discharge. Plus, by this point we had either lost or used all of our good items, meaning no more Oran Berries or Max Elixirs. Yet Team Slacker lazily pressed on. Our first attempt hit a monster house on floor 5, no way I couldn't take them on myself, so I popped a Quick Orb hoping to run away. Unfortunately, the Quick Orb didn't speed up Slakoth, so the entire monster house was right on my tail the entire time, tracking us down and eliminating Slakoth at 62 damage extra sensory. Attempt 2 had yet another monster house, this time on floor 2, which hardly seems fair. I tried to go for the same strategy, but unfortunately one of the Porygon Z popped an agility, and it was impossible to get away. On attempt 3, we didn't actually encounter any issues until floor 9, when a random Porygon 2's discharge dealt 87 damage, knocking me out instantly. Attempt 4 was an 81 damage crit tackle from Porygon Z. Attempt 5, back to the floor 9, but died to a discharge. On attempt 6, I stumbled across a TM for Vacuum Cut and replaced Rest with it, right before dying to another discharge. I thought it might be useful to know another offensive move, especially one that can attack multiple opponents. Attempt 7, I quickly learned how big of a mistake learning Vacuum Cut was, and I was discharged to death on the first floor. Attempt 8, same, discharges death on the first floor, which somehow froze my game. The mini cutscene that normally plays when you wake up after a defeat refused to play. The DS itself wasn't frozen, the idle animation in the water was still running, but I was effectively softlocked. Thankfully, I hadn't saved since learning the TM, so I did at least get rest back after resetting my DS. Also, I kind of got emotionally frustrated and decided to fast forward while playing this game, so that might explain these next few deaths. Yep, that answers my question! 3 floors. 3 floors, or whatever speed modifier that we're at. Take what we can get, come on, let me leave. I was on the stairs! Fuck you, oh my god. I'm going to break my hand. I don't know why I said that, I don't know why my hand specifically. I'm gonna break something, come on. Come on, yeah, I deserve that. It wasn't until attempt 18 that something different happened, where I finally gained the opportunity to learn Slack Off, and decided to learn it instead of Rest, since it heals instantly instead of waiting a few turns. Now, officially, both of us were truly Slackers. So of course, this was the attempt where I made it all the way through to floor 10, and finally beat Temporal Spire to face the final boss of the game, Primal Dialga. Now again, unlike with Dusknoir and the Sableye, I knew by now the best strategy for single target boss fights, disable Yawn and beat the crap out of them. But due to pressure ability, each move cost 2 PP instead of 1, and his massive health and damage stats meant that this would be the hardest boss yet. We were able to get him asleep, confused, and disabled pretty quickly, but in just a few handful of turns I ran out of PP for both Disable and Water Pulse, and... Slakoth, please. Fuck! No! No! Yeah, so after all that, we still weren't able to beat him. And all the way back to the beginning of Temporal Spire we went. Thankfully, it only took about 5 or 6 more attempts at Temporal Spire to get back to Dialga. And this time... So I think the biggest mistake we had last time was the confusion. I don't know how we avoid confusion. It's just something that we have to hope doesn't happen. Do I have any items that will help us here? I'm going to disable. You are going to yawn. Wonderful. We're going to open up our other moves. I'm going to hit him with Zen Headbutt first. Now, I know it's not very effective, but we're doing what we can. Okay, and now we're gonna move to Water Pulse, stab moves. Yeah, none of my moves are very effective against him. That would have been nice to have very effective moves. Oh well. Okay, here we go. Come on. He's confused. I don't like him being confused, because if he's confused, that means he can walk away. But at the very least, it does mean that we won't be able to, oh god. Why are so many of my moves missing too? Fuck me! Okay, come on. Okay, disable. Good. None of my moves are very effective. God, this sucks. Can you... You have enough yawns. Use yawn, motherfucker, please. Good God. Disable. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. You can use other moves now again. Use your other moves, fucker. Please. I'm gonna hit him with Zen Headbutt, because that's my last PP move. I'm out of moves. I cannot use moves anymore. I'm gonna throw Iron Thorns. They're about as effective as my moves. Slakoth, what is happening? Why are you getting blocked by every single one of your attacks? Thank you. Okay. I don't have any more moves, so I'm just gonna hit him normal. My normal moves aren't hitting either. And this kills. Does not kill. Hit him disable. Thank you. Yes! Woo! Finally! So just like that, after somehow surviving a Roar of Time with only 2 HP and no PP left, Team Slacker was able to defeat Primal Dialga and save time. And just look at how happy I am. So to answer the question, yes, Team Slacker can, despite all their shortcomings, beat Pokémon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. I feel like they've earned a well-deserved nap. So, who's next? Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I know this one took a very long time for me to make. I just absolutely struggled with scripting. I think if I do another challenge video like this, it's not going to be fully scripted. It's going to be like I used to do. But either way, thank you. I hope you like and subscribe. Have a great rest of the day.